Welcome to the next video about reliability. Again, this is something you're going to have to think about when planning your study. Just like validity, it's very important that you are getting reliable scores so that you can do correct analysis. The definition of reliability is the extent to which an experiment, test, or measuring procedure yields the same results on repeated trials. The question you need to ask yourself when considering reliability is that if you were to test today, tomorrow, and the next day, would you get the same result, or would I get the same result based on my procedures? In class, we've talked about a couple of the factors that affect reliability. One of them could be the weather. If you're performing your test outside, if it's rained one week and doesn't rain the next, is your test going to be affected? Okay, sprint speeds might be affected if you haven't got the correct footwear on. What about the environment? If you decide one day you're going to do your testing on the beach, and then the next day you're going to test on gravel, the next day you're going to test on pavements. Even if you're performing the same test, you would undoubtedly get different answers. Okay, so the reliability of the results that you're getting isn't there. A person's diet will affect their results. If they've had loads of carbohydrates and you ask them to do an endurance test, then you expect them to go for longer. So you might want to think about standardizing diet when you're designing that you study. How much someone's had to drink. Okay, if they've had loads of water and they're hydrated, they're going to perform better than if someone hasn't had a drink. If they're motivated, it doesn't just have to be physical factors. Okay, so motivation and confidence, both psychological factors that could affect someone's performance in a test. So these are all things you need to be thinking of. They're just a couple of examples. There are a lot more that you would need to think about when you're planning your study. A test cannot be valid if it's not reliable because the results are not trustworthy. Yes, we had a little discussion about this in our last lesson. So they cannot be valid if not reliable, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to trust your results. And therefore, if you can't trust your results, your study is lacking support. Okay, something to be really considering when you plan your study is errors. Okay, errors are defined as, in classical test theory, the part of an observed score that is attributed to measurement error. So again, I'm using Thomas Nelson Silverman 2005, a really good book to use when you're starting research methods. Okay, the way I want you to look at errors at the minute without going into too much depth is the 4 areas listed on the PowerPoint here. Okay, so the areas of error could be the participant, and that could go back to factors such as motivation. You know, one week might come in motivated, one week they might not come in motivated. The testing that you're actually performing, the procedures you put in place, the scoring of the measurements, and the instrument or equipment used. Okay, so all them 4 things will amount to errors. Human error, instrument error. You've got to be aware that your results are never going to be 100% accurate. Okay. There are reliability measures that I would like you to consider when planning your studies and thinking about over the next few weeks. Okay. One of them is the inter-tester reliability. This is defined as the degree to which different tests can obtain the same scores on the same participants. It's also known as objectivity. My example here is skin fold analysis. Okay, we've been doing skin folds over the last few weeks. We did it in first year as well. If you and the people in your group were all to perform skin fold on the same person, would you get the same results? Okay, thinking about human error, and thinking about the technique used to take skin folds, would you get the same results if you all did the same test? Finally, test, retest reliability. Okay, the definition of this is the method of determining stability in which a test is given one day and then administered exactly as the day before. This goes back again to consistency with your procedures. If you're doing your test one day, and you're doing it in the sports hall, and you're doing it at the same time of day, you would expect to get the same result on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. If, however, on a Monday you do your test slightly differently, you've got it on a different surface, or you're doing it at a different time of day, there's a good chance that your result will change. So when you plan your study, you need to keep thinking about how you're going to manage to keep your testing days exactly the same all the time. Okay, so doing your test at the same time of day, doing your test with the same diet, making sure the people are drinking the same thing, will keep the test retest reliability nice and high. Okay, in summary of the two videos, although I've separated the videos out, okay, we looked at these in a lesson in the last lab that we had. The graph on the left hand side where all the dots are in the top right hand corner is reliable but not valid. It's reliable because all the scores are close together. It's not valid because the scores haven't hit the center of the target. Moving on to the second graph, it's valid but not reliable. It's not reliable because the person hasn't hit the same place twice. His scores are scattered all over the graph and none of them have hit the same place. It's valid, however, because if we would take an average of all them scores, the average would fall around about the middle of that graph. On to the third graph, neither reliable nor valid. Okay, some people might get confused with the graph before. It's not reliable because the test results are all over the place again. He hasn't hit the same place twice, or she hasn't hit the same place twice. Okay, it's not valid because if you were to take an average of all them scores, the average score would fall outside of the center of that graph. Okay, you might find it on the second or third line away from the center spot. Finally, the fourth graph. That graph shows that the person who's taken the test is both reliable and valid because 1, they've hit the center of the target every time, and 2, the scores are really close together. So reliability and validity is something you need to really consider when planning your study. And essentially, validity and reliability is what will make or break your testing, how good your results are going to turn out, and how meaningful your study is going to be overall.